Welcome to How to Build a Blackgates Sweet Pea 5-inch gauge locomotive. This is part 24. After applying etch primer to the rebuilt pony truck, I paint it using HMG paint satin black, followed by cleaning the chassis and painting that with etch primer. Here's the pony truck on the bench, and I painted it 24 hours ago using etch primer. It's a special paint, usually designed for painting steel, and it contains an acid which eats into the metal slightly, making the primer stick to the metal very well. On larger panels you can rub down this etching primer, it really does stick to the metal very well, but for these parts I'm not doing that. Once the etch primer was thoroughly dry, I gave it a coat of this stuff, HMG Paints C71 Black Satin. I had originally thought about getting this chassis sandblasted and powder coated, but my personal experience of powder coating on locomotive chassis is not good. Round about 1996 I built a 7¼ inch gauge titch and a passenger truck, and I had the engine chassis and the passenger truck powder coated, but over the years it didn't fare well. Water got underneath the paint and the paint fell off in sheets, so that's why I decided not to do the same with this. The paint that's on this engine is quite well stuck to it. It's dirty, it wants a clean, and some of it is chipped. What I'm doing here is cleaning it using cellulose thinners. A couple of words of caution. One is, if you're using cellulose thinners like this, make sure that you are working in a very well ventilated area. And don't apply too much, only apply sufficient to remove the dirt, not the paint. The general rule is to have the paintbrush in one hand and a cloth in the other. If you apply too much cellulose thinners to the paint, it will blister and fall off, and I really don't want that to happen, so I'm being very careful. There is actually a very fine line between removing the paint and removing the dirt, and I do recommend that if you want to try this method, use a piece of scrap painted metal first to see how you go on. This is the underside at the back of the chassis, and looking at this it would appear that originally this engine was built as an 040 and the pony truck was added as an afterthought. As you can see here, there is evidence of welding of the stretcher to the frames. This is not a problem, at least it's going to be strong. I carried on the cleaning process over every part of the chassis, even on the inside edges of the horn blocks. When I paint this chassis, I am not going to mask the inside edges of the horn blocks, as it is a simpler and quicker job to scrape off the paint using the edge of a steel rule. What I'm doing here is using my Proxxon angle grinder fitted with a flapper wheel to clean up the area around where the pony truck fits. I'm going to clean this up further by using some JB Weld, but I need to paint it with etching primer first. There is, however, one part of the chassis I do not want to paint. You can see how the paint's worn away. This is where the pony truck puts pressure on the chassis when the engine's running. Here's a closer look at the gunmetal block. This acts as a thrust bearing when the rear part of the locomotive's weight is on the pony truck. I prefer a metal-to-metal contact, so for starters I'm removing the paint using the edge of a steel rule. This shows how well the paint was stuck to the chassis in the first place. I had to revert to using my small detail sander to remove some of the paint, and this was quite tricky because there wasn't much room to manoeuvre in this area. This removed almost all of the paint, but once again I reverted back to my Proxxon angle grinder with the flapper wheel, which got rid of the rest of it. Of all the tools in my workshop, this Proxxon angle grinder is one of the most useful. Once I'd finished grinding in this area, I decided it would be a good idea to give it another coat of cellulose thinners to get rid of all the dust and debris. Here I've applied some masking tape to the bare metal area, because very shortly I'm going to respray this chassis, and I don't see the point in removing the paint a second time. I worked my way all over this chassis. Here it's on its side, and I'm using some Scotch-Brite soaked in a bit of cellulose thinners to clean off the paint and any lumpy bits. Here I'm using a bit too much cellulose thinners, and very quickly after doing this I wiped it off with a cloth. The surface finish of the chassis is never going to be perfect. Have you ever looked at a full-size locomotive chassis? They're not perfect either. This will be okay, and it's into the outer part of the workshop to start the respray process. I'm using etching primer, and this stuff is really good. You have to be careful when overpainting existing paint, because depending on the paint that you're using, it can remove the layer underneath. But this stuff never seems to do that. I don't know why, but it allows me to spray the bare metal parts as well as previously painted parts without any reaction occurring. The buffer beam ends were painted red on both sides, but I don't like this. I think on the inside of the chassis I want it to be black. I'm being very careful not to spray too much paint onto this existing paint in case it does react. I need to get it just right. And as you can see, so far there is no reaction whatsoever between the etching primer and the existing paint. In this clip I'm painting the top edges of the chassis, so I stood it on its end for this. This chassis is not 100% finished. There are still some holes to drill for things like the drain cock operating levers. And that was another reason for not going down the powder coating route, because any damage done to the top coat of the paint I'm going to apply to this can be easily repaired by just overspraying the damaged parts. Here's a rare shot of me in action. I thought I'd show you my t-shirt. It says, "I am not insane, my mother had me tested." All I can say is, if you know, you know. It's from a very popular American sitcom, one of my personal favourites. With the paint drying on the bench, that is it for this episode. Stay safe, stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.